If I could go back, I'd burn that cabin to the ground before ever stepping foot inside. But back then I was just running. From what? I wasn't even sure anymore. A breakup, a job I hated, a version of myself I couldn't stand. I thought the isolation of Alaska would help me find clarity. Instead, it found me. I arrived during what the locals called the polar night, a stretch of winter when the sun disappears for weeks. The darkness was thick. Not just an absence of light, but something heavier, denser. It swallowed sound. Time felt warped. My phone said it was 3 p.m., but it looked like midnight. Always midnight. The town was small, barely a dozen buildings, tucked beneath a range of silent, snow-covered peaks. People didn't talk much, or look you in the eye. Only one woman, older, with cloudy eyes and a voice like cracked ice, stopped me as I passed her store. She didn't smile. The dark doesn't. Just cover things up, she said. It remembers you. Then she turned and walked away, leaving her words hanging in the frozen air, heavier than the snow piling on my shoulders. I should have listened to her. The cabin was a few miles past the last flicker of town light, where the road narrowed into a frozen trail lined with skeletal trees. It looked charming enough in the listing. A rustic A-frame tucked against a ridge, quiet. Perfect for writers and recluses. But in person, it felt abandoned by time. The wood was dry and cracked, the windows frosted from the inside, and when I opened the door, the air was still, like it hadn't been breathed in years. The landlord, a man named Elias, handed me the keys without ever stepping out of his truck. He barely made eye contact. "Don't go wandering at night," he muttered, "and keep your fire burning." I asked why, but he just drove off, taillights vanishing into the dark like embers. There was no sunrise the next day, or the one after. The sky stayed the same, inky, starless, and pressing down on everything like a blanket soaked in shadow. My watch stopped working within hours. I replaced the battery. It blinked once, then died again. Nights were worse. I'd lie awake, listening to the silence only to realize it wasn't truly silent. There was a low, distant humming, faint, like a voice buried beneath the snow. At first I thought it was the wind catching the eaves, but the sound pulsed, rising and falling like breath. Then, on the fourth night, I noticed something on the window. Outside, a handprint. Enormous, smeared and crude, like something had pressed a wet, distorted palm to the glass. I froze. I checked the door. Locked. Windows too. I stood there for what felt like hours, staring at that print, breath fogging the glass as I tried to match my hand to it. Mine was half its size. I told myself it was condensation, a trick of the cold. But every morning it came back. Always a little, higher up the glass, always just waiting. The locals wouldn't say much when I asked, just tight nods and mumbled nothings. One man whispered, "The woods hold old things," then walked off before I could press him. I started leaving the lights on at night. I stopped looking out the windows. By the end of the first week, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching me. Not in the metaphorical sense, I mean a presence. I'd catch glimpses of movement outside the cabin, shadows that shifted even when the wind was still, branches cracking in rhythm with my own steps. The humming hadn't stopped. If anything, it was growing louder. Closer. One night, I snapped. Sleep-deprived, nerves shot, I grabbed my flashlight and stepped into the woods. The beam cut through. The dark like a sword, but beyond it, nothing. Just trees, reaching up into the black sky like claws. I followed the sound, deeper and deeper, boots crunching on brittle snow. At some point I realized I'd lost the path. My phone had no signal. The trees looked identical in every direction. I turned around, then again. I couldn't tell which way I came. Panic clawed at my throat. Then, I saw it. A clearing. A pale stretch of snow disturbed by small mounds. Bones. Animal bones at first, maybe, but one stuck out. Long, narrow, unmistakably human. I brushed more snow away, a spine. I staggered back and nearly tripped over a post half buried, carved with crude symbols. A totem, old rotted wood, and something embedded in it. Teeth. Human teeth, packed into the grooves like offerings. The humming was louder now, vibrating in my chest. The air grew thick. The darkness around me didn't just surround, it pressed, like it had weight, like it was watching me, breathing. I couldn't hear the wind anymore, just my heartbeat and the low pulsing hum. I ran. Branches slapped my face, ice bit my lungs. I had no idea where I was going. I just moved, driven by raw instinct. I finally burst through the trees, the cabin glowing faintly ahead, its porch, light flickering like a dying star. But I didn't come back alone. That night the humming didn't stop when I locked the door. It echoed through the walls, under the floorboards, inside my skull. I stared at the fireplace, shaking, listening to something pace slowly across my roof, back and forth, dragging long limbs behind it. The next morning, new prints circled the cabin. They weren't mine. I stopped keeping track of days. There was no sunrise, no color shift in the sky, just endless, suffocating black. Every time I checked the clock, it read some version of night. Midnight, 2 a.m., 4. But it all felt like the same night. I couldn't tell if I'd slept for 2 hours or 2 weeks. Food went uneaten. My reflection looked thinner, paler, eyes sunken like I hadn't rested in years. Then one night there was a knock. A man stood outside, bundled in patchwork winter gear, face shadowed by a fur-lined hood. I didn't ask how he got here. No one ever walked this far up. He just looked at me and said, "You're in the cabin, aren't you?" He stepped inside before I could respond, shaking off snow that didn't seem to melt. "I lived here too," he said. 5 years ago, I tried to leave. His voice was flat, hollow, like it echoed from somewhere deeper than his throat. Tried to burn it. Didn't work. The dark keeps what it likes. I laughed uneasily. "You don't look that old." He pulled back his hood. His skin was dry, cracked like old leather. His eyes were milky, pupils pinpricks of frost. Dead eyes. "I'm not alive anymore," he whispered. "I'm a memory. The dark remembers." Then he left. The next morning I asked a local about him, described his clothes, his face. The man just blinked and said, "No one lives up there but you." That night, I explored the attic, desperate to find something. And I did. A box of photographs buried under dusty tarps. I flipped through them, my breath catching with every image. Me, or someone who looked exactly like me. Same face, but older. Wearing clothes I didn't own. Smiling in rooms I hadn't touched. One photo showed me standing in front of the mirror, but my reflection was turned toward the camera. Smiling. My hands shook so violently I dropped the box. The photographs spilled, scattering across the wooden floor like dead leaves. Each one showed me. Older, staring. I didn't sleep that night. I stopped looking in mirrors. I started wondering if I'd already been here before. The night isn't just a backdrop here. It's not the absence of light. It's something else, something alive. I can feel it watching me, listening, learning. It knows me. Every forgotten pain, every failure I tried to bury, it drags them up like corpses through snow. I tried to leave. I packed what I could, drove until the road disappeared beneath a wall of snow that hadn't been there the day before. The GPS spun in loops, signal gone. My compass pointed south no matter which way I turned. The forest swallowed sound. My own voice came back delayed, like something was repeating it just behind the trees. I turned around, back to the cabin. Only, it wasn't the same. The furniture had moved. The windows were taller. The hallway seemed longer. A door I hadn't noticed before stood at the end, slightly ajar. When I opened it, it led to a closet too shallow to step into, but I heard breathing inside. At night the dark speaks, not in words, but in memories. My mother's voice calling me in the exact tone she used the night she died. My ex's laughter. A scream I didn't recognize, but somehow knew belonged to me. Footsteps echoed through the halls when I stood still. Always in the next room, always just out of sight. The mirrors are the worst. I've stopped glancing at them altogether, but sometimes I catch flashes, my reflection doing things I haven't done. Smiling when I'm terrified, blinking when my eyes are wide open. Watching me as if it's waiting for me to become it. I started recording myself, trying to keep a grasp on reality. But every morning, the tapes are blank. Or worse, they show things that didn't happen. Me talking to someone just out of frame. Me crying. Me sleepwalking into the woods. I think the night is feeding. Not just on time, but on me. On my sense of self. My history. I forget names now. Places. I'll think of a childhood memory, and it fades like mist in seconds. It's keeping me here. Preserving me like an insect in amber. Because once the night remembers you, it never lets go. I waited for the right moment. When the humming faded, when the air stood still. I soaked the floors in lighter fluid, stuffed torn pages from old books into every crevice. My hands trembled as I struck the match, but I didn't hesitate. The flames roared to life, devouring the walls, the memories, the thing the dark had made of me. I ran, into the woods, into the cold, my breath slicing the air. Behind me, the sky turned orange, not from the fire, but from something else, from a glow. Faint, golden, and impossible. Dawn. For the first time in weeks, I saw it, the light of morning breaking through the trees, not from the horizon, but deep within the forest. I chased it, heart pounding, boots slipping on the frost. Branches tore at my face, but I didn't stop. I could feel the warmth just ahead, and then I broke through the last line of trees, back at the cabin, still standing, untouched. The windows stared at me like eyes. My reflection stood in one of them, older, hollow, smiling with a mouth that wasn't mine. The night doesn't end here because I never should have come, and now I never left. I thought I was alone out here. I was wrong. The cabin was supposed to be an escape, a break from the concrete, the noise, the deadlines that never ended. Just me, a wood stove, and miles of Alaskan silence. I didn't even tell anyone where I was going. That was the point. Total disconnection. The air was crisp when I arrived, the sky painted in icy blues, the kind of cold that sinks into your bones no matter how many layers you wear. The cabin sat at the edge of a frozen tree line, beautiful in that empty, untouched way. But even on the first day, something felt off. It wasn't anything obvious. Just little things. Like the way the snow around the steps looked slightly disturbed, though I hadn't been up there yet. Or how the trees didn't sway even when the wind howled. That night, after I unpacked and lit the fire, I heard footsteps. Crunching snow, slow and deliberate. I peered through the frost-laced window, heart thudding, but saw nothing. No one. Still, the sound moved. Around the cabin. A full circle. Then it stopped. I held my breath, staring into the dark. I should have left right then. The drive out felt like slipping into another world, one paved in ice and wrapped in silence. Trees stretched endlessly in every direction, bare and skeletal. No cell service, no GPS. Just an old printout of directions from the rental site and my gut telling me to keep going. When I finally pulled up to the cabin, the sun was dipping, casting long blue shadows across the snow. It looked peaceful. Quiet. Too quiet. The place was perched on a ridge, slightly tilted like it had been leaning toward the woods for years. No nearby houses. No other cars. Just mine, now idling with its heater gasping warm air. I should have felt relief, finally away from everything, but what I felt instead was watched. I stopped in town briefly for firewood and supplies. The clerk barely spoke but perked up when I mentioned the cabin. Someone finally took it, huh? He muttered. When I asked what he meant, he just handed me my change and said, "Keep the fire going." By nightfall, I was unpacking, the warmth of the stove crawling into the walls. The silence felt thick, heavy. As I stacked canned food in the pantry, I heard a distinct thump upstairs. My blood froze, but there was no upstairs. I stood there motionless, listening. Another shuffle, lighter this time, like someone dragging their feet across old wood. I grabbed my flashlight and crept down the hallway, shining it along the ceiling. Nothing. No attic door. No crawl space. Just solid, cracked wood panels above. Checked every room, every corner. Nothing moved. Nothing out of place. But the air near the back of the cabin smelled strange, faintly sweet and sour, like fruit left too long in a dark room. Rotted. It clung to my throat and didn't fade. Slept on the couch that night. Back to the fire, eyes on the hallway. The next morning, I searched again. Found nothing. No entry point, no critters, no answers. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I hadn't been alone. And that sound, it hadn't been in my head. It was real. Even if no one believed it, I heard it. Something moved above me. The next few days blurred together. I tried to settle in, read, hike, write a little, but something kept tugging at the edge of my attention. Like I was sharing the space with someone who stayed just out of sight. I told myself it was nerves, maybe just the silence playing tricks. But then, things started showing up. It began small. An old toothbrush in the bathroom I swore wasn't there before. Not the kind left behind by accident. This one looked used recently. Wet bristles, the faint scent of mint clinging to the counter. I tossed it, uneasy but rationalizing. Maybe the cleaners missed it. Then I found a single muddy boot by the fireplace. Not mine. Larger. Worn leather, laces frayed, crusted with frozen dirt. I hadn't even gone out that day. I checked the lock. It was still latched. Windows too. I started keeping track of everything, a notebook just to ground myself. But each day, new things emerged. Scratches behind the couch, almost like claw marks. A spoon in the sink I didn't use. Once, the pantry door wide open with a single can resting on the floor. I convinced myself these were remnants of the last tenant. Sloppy cleaning. Old echoes. Until the fourth night. I was asleep. Finally, deeply. And then I heard it. A voice. It whispered my name. Soft. Gentle. Inches from my ear, I jolted upright, heart slamming in my chest, mouth dry. The cabin was still. The fire low. My breath visible in the cold air. For a second, I thought I'd dreamed it, until I realized my feet were freezing. The front door was open. Not cracked. Not swinging. Wide open, snow drifting in across the floor, coating the rug in a fine, glittering layer. I ran to it, slammed it shut, bolted every lock, and stood there listening. Nothing but the wind outside. But even that felt wrong, off rhythm, stuttered like it was pretending to be the wind. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. I sat with my back to the door, flashlight in hand, waiting for something I didn't want to see. I don't remember falling asleep. But when I woke, the boot was gone. I found the journal while trying to seal off a draft in the floorboards. A loose plank in the back hallway revealed a crawl space beneath the cabin, musty, low, filled with decades of dust and old insulation. Most of it was junk. Broken chair legs, rusted nails, a cracked snowshoe. But wedged in the corner, half wrapped in a stained wool blanket, was a leather-bound notebook. The pages were yellowed, curling at the edges. Every inch covered in messy, frantic handwriting. Some words scratched out, others circled again and again. The entry started normal. Dates, mentions of chores, snowfall amounts, but then it spiraled. It lives in the walls, one page read. Waits until I sleep. Sounds like me now. Knows my name. Another. It called to me last night from the tree. Line, but I was inside. It was inside too. I flipped faster, my hands trembling. It watches through the cracks. Mirrors lie. Burn the voice. Then just pages and pages of my name. Over and over. Different ink, different pressure. Some backwards. I dropped the journal and crawled out, heart racing, breath shallow. I didn't want to believe it. Thought maybe it was just a rambling lunatic, someone who lost their mind in the isolation. But then I heard it. My voice, calling my name. From outside it was faint but clear, echoing through the woods like I was standing 20 feet into the trees just out of sight. I was inside. Alone. I hadn't spoken a word. I ran to the window, snow-covered branches. Nothing else. Then again, "Hey," louder. Urgent. "I need help." It sounded just like me, but off somehow. Like it was stitched together from memory. The cadence wasn't right. The breath between syllables felt mechanical. Like something trying too hard. I backed away from the window. The voice kept calling, circling the cabin like a hunter mimicking its prey, always staying out of sight. Always mine. I shoved the journal under the bed and didn't touch it again. I started whispering to myself that night. Not prayers, just reminders. I am me. I'm the only one here. I'm still real. I wasn't sure how long that would stay true. I couldn't take it anymore. I sealed every door, nailed the windows shut, even wedged furniture against the front entry like it would matter. Paranoia wasn't a strong enough word. It was survival now. I needed proof. Something. Real. So I set up my old camcorder facing the hallway and rigged a trail camera I'd brought for wildlife shots to cover the back door. Motion triggered. Night vision. My last grip on sanity. That night, the fire was low, but strong. I sat in the living room, wrapped in a blanket, forcing myself to stay awake. Around 2 a.m., I heard it again. Heavy footsteps. Slow. Pacing. But they weren't in the hallway or outside. They were above me. I froze, heart pounding in my ears. There was no attic. The cabin was a single floor. But the steps continued, deliberate, back and forth like something trapped in a cage just above the ceiling. I grabbed a flashlight and followed the sound down the hall. That's when I noticed it. Subtle seams in the ceiling. A square panel. I'd never seen before. I grabbed a broomstick, pressed upward, and the hatch creaked open. Cold air rushed out. It smelled of rot and damp wood. I pulled myself up into the crawl space. It was small. Just enough room to crouch. Dust danced in the beam of my light. And in the corner, I saw claw marks. Deep gouges in the wood, like something had tried to dig its way down. But what made my skin crawl wasn't the scratches. It was the mirror, a tall antique frame, leaning against the far wall. I stared at it, heart hammering, until I realized my reflection wasn't mirroring me. It stood still while I moved, and then it smiled. A slow, deliberate grin I didn't make. I scrambled back, nearly falling through the hatch, landing hard on the floor below. I slammed the panel shut, drove nails through the edges, and didn't look up again. The next morning I checked the cameras. Nothing. Just static. Except at 2:03 a.m. Both feeds went black. Then flickered, and for exactly 5 seconds, I stood in the hallway, staring into the lens, smiling. I ran. No bags, no coat. Just the clothes on my back and breath fogging the air as I tore through the trees. I didn't care where I ended up as long as it was away. The cabin vanished behind me, swallowed by dark and snow. But the woods weren't endless. After maybe 10 minutes or hours, I stumbled into a clearing and froze. Another cabin stood there, identical. Same cracked porch, same leaning frame. Except the windows glowed faintly like it was waiting. Drawn by something I couldn't explain, I stepped inside. The air was warm, dustless, familiar. But what made my blood go cold was the camera on the table, same model I used. Already playing. The footage showed me walking into the original cabin weeks ago. I never left. Just loop after loop of me entering, and then darkness. I turned toward the mirror on the wall. My reflection stood still. No breath, no blink. Then, it smiled. I backed away, heart pounding, but I already knew. I came here to disappear. I didn't think something else was waiting to take my place. But it had, and now it wears my face better than I ever did. I was supposed to pass through a small Alaskan village, except now, it doesn't exist on any map. And I'm not sure I ever left. It was meant to be a detour, just a few hours off route while waiting for the mountain pass to clear. My GPS had already failed, the snowstorm creeping in faster than forecasted. That's when I saw it, dim lights flickering through the trees, tucked into a valley the road wasn't supposed to lead to. The sign simply read, Vel Ridge. Weathered, tilted. I'd never heard of it. By the time I pulled into the village, the snow was falling sideways. A man in a wool coat waved me toward an old inn like he'd been expecting me. No one asked questions, no credit card, just a brass key and a hot drink. The people were kind, almost too kind, but quiet. Their smiles lingered too long, like they were holding something back. I told myself it was just an old-fashioned place. But that night, when I tried to look it up, there was nothing, no Vel Ridge, no records, no coordinates, just empty static. That's when I first felt it, the sense that I'd stepped into a place that remembered things the world forgot. My GPS died somewhere past the last gas station. 1 minute I had a route, the next I was staring at a frozen screen with a spinning icon. The road ahead was narrow, winding through thick pine and snowdrifts climbing like walls on either side. I should have turned back, but the storm was rolling in hard, swallowing everything behind me in white. That's when I saw it again. Lights, dim and golden, like lanterns, flickering through the trees. I followed a gravel path barely wide enough for my car, curving down into a valley. And there it was, a village. Small wooden homes huddled together, smoke rising from chimneys, soft yellow light glowing behind frosted windows. The kind of place you only see in snow globes. Except this wasn't on any map. No signs, no markings, just there. I parked near what looked like a town square, and before I could step out, a man approached. Middle-aged, worn coat, wool cap. He smiled gently, like he already knew me. "You'll want the inn," he said. "Storm's not letting up tonight." Inside, the place was warm, almost too warm. No front desk, no check-in. The woman behind, the counter, handed me a key and a plate of stew without asking my name. There was no Wi-Fi, no cell service, not even a landline. My phone was just a flashlight now. When I asked if there was somewhere I could contact home, the woman simply said, "We don't worry about all that up here." That night I walked the village square. The air was still but heavy, like everything had been paused mid-breath. The cars looked old, 1950s style, perfectly preserved. Radios played fuzzy music through open windows, no TVs in sight. The storefronts had names etched into wooden signs, faded but intact. A tailor, a bakery, a general store. It felt like stepping into a postcard from another century. When I tried asking a younger man about nearby towns or how far we were from Fairbanks, he smiled but didn't answer. Just nodded and said, "You should rest. Storms like this don't blow over easy." Something about his tone made my stomach turn, like he knew I wouldn't be leaving in the morning. I packed before sunrise. I didn't care how bad the roads were. I needed to get back to somewhere with cell service, with answers. The village had unsettled me in a way I couldn't explain, like it was watching me breathe. I barely slept, and when I did, I dreamed of music playing backward and voices whispering from snowbanks. I followed the same gravel path I came in on, the only road in or out. It curved through the trees past the familiar ridge, but 20 minutes in, something was wrong. The same wooden fence, the same crooked birch. I kept driving. Then the village reappeared, Vel Ridge, right where I started. I turned around, took the path again. Slower this time, counting turns. Same result. 3 times I tried. Every road led back. I stopped in the square, hands shaking, breath fogging the windshield. Outside, the villagers had gathered, scattered in doorways, windows, standing, perfectly still. No smiles now, just eyes, watching, measuring. A boy with frost on his lashes approached my car. He didn't look more than 10. "You can't leave," he said softly. "No one does." I rolled down the window. "Why?" He blinked slowly. "Because you came here." That evening I stayed in my room, heart hammering. I told myself it was just panic. Maybe the storm had buried the road, maybe I'd missed a turn. I tried to read but couldn't focus. The village outside was too quiet. Until the bells started. Faint at first. Coming from the forest. Distant chimes, soft, metallic and wrong, like they were underwater. I crept to the window. Shapes moved between the trees, tall, slow, gliding through the snow without breaking its surface. I slammed the shutters closed. A knock came at my door. Not pounding, just deliberate. 3 soft taps. I held my breath. Didn't move. The knock came again, followed by a whisper. "Let us in." It wasn't a question. The voice sounded like mine. I backed away from the door. The innkeeper knocked moments later, real this time. Her eyes were wide. "Don't answer," she said. "Whatever you hear tonight, do not go outside." The next morning, I forced myself to explore, desperate to prove this was all in my head. Maybe I'd had a breakdown. Maybe I just needed to see sunlight, feel air that didn't carry whispers. I wandered toward the outskirts, past the empty post office and a chapel that hadn't rung its bell in years. That's when I found it, a pond. It sat at the edge of the forest, wide and flat, encircled by weather-worn stones. Strange carvings were etched into them, symbols I didn't recognize. Spirals, jagged runes, and what looked like crude figures with stretched mouths. The ice was perfectly clear, untouched by snow. At first I thought it was just reflections beneath the surface, shadows of trees. But as I leaned closer, I saw them. Faces. Dozens of them, maybe more. Twisted in terror, eyes wide and mouths frozen mid-scream. Pressed beneath the ice as if clawing upward. The deeper I looked, the larger they got. Limbs, hands, something massive buried beneath. I stumbled back, slipped, and ran. Back in town, I broke into the tiny library. Dust-covered shelves, cracked spines. One book sat open on a table like someone had just left it, an old journal. "They came here like I did," it read. "Visitors, drifters, lost souls, it watches them, freezes them in place. Then, it learns to wear them." The entries got worse. They hear bells before it comes. The people here serve it, or maybe they're already part of it. I dropped the journal and ran to the inn. That night, the bells came again. Clearer now. Closer. I shut every curtain, lit every candle. But it wasn't enough. A knock rattled the glass. I turned slowly. Someone stood outside my window, face pressed to the frost. It was me. Same coat, same tired eyes, and when it whispered my name, I knew it wasn't trying to fool me. It wanted me to know. I watched as it faded back into the woods, never breaking eye contact. The candles flickered, and I finally understood. This village didn't trap people by mistake. It called to them, and I had answered. I snapped the next morning, packed what little I had and grabbed a gas can from the inn's shed. If roads didn't work, I'd make one. If the woods kept me in, I'd burn my way out. I wasn't staying here, not in this place that watched, that whispered, that wore my face. I hiked to the tree line and poured fuel in a long line, my hands shaking the entire time. I struck the match and dropped it. The fire caught instantly, orange and angry, licking at the trees like it might actually work. But within seconds, the flames shrank, hissed, and died. No smoke, no heat, just gone, like the woods had inhaled it. When I turned back, 3 villagers stood behind me, silent, watching. I screamed at them, demanded to know what this place was. The oldest, a man with pale blue eyes and wind-chapped lips, stepped forward. Velridge was forgotten, he said. Left off maps, erased from memory. It liked that. It? I asked. The village, he replied, eyes unblinking. It remembers who finds it, remembers what they were. It keeps them here, or becomes them. I backed away and ran. I don't know why, but I ended up behind the chapel. There was a small hill half buried in snow, with a line of wooden plaques sticking out like broken teeth, names, dates. I brushed snow from one. It was mine. My name, first and last. Dated 5 years ago. I stood there, unable to move, the cold forgotten. Behind me, the church bell rang, once, twice. And then the snow lifted. Not fell. Lifted. Tiny flakes, rising off the ground, spiraling slowly upward like ashes in reverse. The air changed. Thicker. Buzzing with something I couldn't see. I stumbled back toward the inn, but the buildings looked different now. Taller, darker. The wood, older than before, blackened like it had been burned long ago and rebuilt from memory. The villagers stood still in the square, waiting. I turned in circles, desperate for something familiar. That's when I heard it. My own voice echoing from the forest, calling my name. Soft. Beckoning. I didn't answer, but I knew it had already found me. I woke up in the inn bed, blankets tucked neatly, sunlight. Real sunlight spilling through the window. For a moment I thought it had been a dream, that I'd finally escaped the storm, the whispers, the things beneath the ice. But then I looked in the mirror. My reflection stared back, but it was just a breath too slow, a blink behind. And when I turned away, I swore I saw it still watching. I stepped outside. The village was busier now, fuller. People bustled between shops, laughing, waving. Children ran through the square, and as I passed, they all turned to me and said in unison, "Morning, your name." They knew me. I tried to speak, but my throat felt dry, like I hadn't used it in years. A man brushed past, smiling wide. "We knew you'd come back," he said, clapping me on the shoulder. I didn't answer, just kept walking. Around me, everything looked right, familiar, but wrong in the way a wax figure smiles. The bell rang from the chapel behind me. One long note. I stayed in a village that no longer appears on any map. But now, neither do I. If your snowmobile stops in the Alaskan interior, you don't wait for help. You pray something doesn't find you first. I learned that the hard way. The storm had hit faster than forecasted, turning everything into a white blur. I'd taken a shortcut, thought I could outrun it. Rookie mistake. Within minutes, the trail vanished. GPS froze, and the snow swallowed the world. No trees, no signs, just flat white stretching in every direction like the land had been erased. Then the OIE engine died, no sputter, no warning, just silence. At first I sat there thinking maybe it overheated, maybe it was the cold. But the longer I waited, the more I realized something was off. It wasn't just quiet, it was empty. The kind of silence that doesn't feel natural. No wind, no movement, just the crunch of my own boots when I stepped off the sled. And still, I didn't feel alone. It wasn't the cold creeping into my bones that made me shiver. It was the feeling that something was already out there, watching, listening, waiting. I should have turned back the moment the trail disappeared, but out here, there's nowhere to turn back to. Just the endless white, and whatever lives beneath. And I checked everything. Fuel line, spark plug, throttle, nothing looked damaged. The gauges were all frozen, unreadable, but that wasn't surprising in this cold. Still, the machine should have worked. It had been running fine just minutes before. Now, it sat silent, like something had switched it off. I tried the radio. Dead. No signal. I pulled out my phone. No bars, just a spinning icon and a battery that drained faster the longer I stared. There was nothing on the horizon. No mountain ridge, no trees. Just white. Flat, endless white. I marked the snowmobile with a neon ribbon for my pack and walked in a wide arc, hoping to spot anything. An elevation change, a shadow, something. But everything blurred together. Distance didn't mean anything out here. You could walk for hours and never be sure you'd moved at all. As the sun dipped, the cold deepened. I set up camp near the sled, built a shallow snow wall and huddled under my emergency blanket, trying not to panic. That's when I heard it, a soft scrape. Not close, not far, just steady, like something dragging itself slowly across the ice. I sat up, heart hammering. It stopped. I waited. Then came another scrape, closer this time. I stood and swept my light across the snow. Nothing. No movement. But as I turned, I caught something else. Footprints. Behind me. I spun again, scanning the flat expanse. No one. Just those tracks, leading directly toward me. They stopped a few feet from where I stood, but I hadn't moved. I'd been standing in that same spot the whole time. My own prints were behind me. I could see the path I took to check the sled. So who or what had made those? I backed up slowly toward the snowmobile, my light shaking in my hand. Silence returned, but it didn't feel empty anymore. It felt watched. I didn't sleep that night. I just sat there, staring at the edge of my light's reach, waiting for the scraping to return. It didn't, but the footprints stayed. At first I thought it was a rock formation, just a black smudge against the endless white. I spotted it on the horizon after sunrise, barely visible through the fog. A shadow, tall, still. I stared at it for a long time. It didn't move, just stood there, jagged and wrong against the smooth snow. I looked away for only a second, to check my compass. When I looked back, it was closer. Not dramatically, just enough to notice. A few feet maybe, but it hadn't walked, no tracks, no sign of movement, just closer. I rubbed my eyes, told myself it was a mirage, a trick of exhaustion, and light. But I couldn't stop watching it. Every time I blinked, it crept forward, always still, always silent, like it only moved when it wasn't being seen. Panic took over. I packed what I could and headed in the opposite direction. South, I thought, or what should have been. I walked fast, then ran, the sled disappearing behind me. But something was wrong. My footprints vanished behind me after a dozen steps, swallowed by the wind or something worse. The hills in the distance kept shifting as if the horizon was folding in on itself. I stopped to get my bearings and turned around. The figure was there. Closer. Too close. It hadn't walked. It had known. That's when the realization hit me. It wasn't following me, it was remembering me, remembering where I stood, where I moved. Like the way you trace the path of something you've studied before. I wasn't escaping it. I was redrawing a map it had already memorized. I tried walking in zigzags, loops, backtracking. Nothing mattered. Every time I stopped, it reappeared. Still, closer, always closer. By the time the sky began to darken again, the figure was within 100 feet, just standing, head tilted slightly. No features I could make out, just a void where a face should be. I stumbled backward, heart in my throat. I didn't dare blink, because every time I did, it changed position, and each new step it remembered was mine. The food ran out first, then the water. I rationed everything, melted snow, chewed frozen protein bars in silence. My flashlight batteries were dying fast, and the cold was working its way inside me deeper every night. I couldn't tell how many days had passed anymore. The sky never stayed bright long enough to count. That's when it started speaking. At first I thought I was going crazy, hearing echoes of my own thoughts. But it wasn't inside my head. It was out there. just beyond the reach of the lantern glow. It called out in my voice. Same tone, same stutter I had when I was scared. "Hello?" it whispered one night. "Is anyone there?" It was me. But I hadn't spoken. I sat perfectly still, teeth clenched as it mimicked me again. "Don't be afraid, I'm just cold." Word for word, the way I'd spoken days earlier alone in the dark. It remembered. That morning, while scavenging near a drift, I spotted something, metal glinting in the snow. Another snowmobile, half buried, just like mine. I dug frantically. The machine was dead, long frozen, but sitting beside it was a jacket, my size. Same brand, same worn elbow patch. Inside the pocket, a journal. I opened it with numb fingers. The handwriting was mine. Page after page, dated days ago. Descriptions of the storm, of the figure, of the voice. Exactly what I'd experienced, written before it happened. The last entry read, "It learns faster each time. Don't let it speak to you. Don't trust the one that sounds like you." Then a final line. "If you're reading this, it's already begun again." I dropped the journal like it burned. Somewhere behind me I heard my voice laugh. Not a chuckle, a low, rattling imitation. It didn't need to find me anymore. It was becoming me. Every thought I had, every word I spoke, it took them, twisted them, reflected them back like a broken mirror. And now I couldn't be sure what I was hearing, or if I was the one saying it. I don't know when I noticed the pattern. Maybe it was the way the frost formed in the same cracks, on my snowmobile windshield every morning, or how the same crow, just one, circled overhead before vanishing into the fog. Or maybe it was the journal, the one I found next to the second sled. I tried to toss it into the fire. The pages wouldn't burn. I tried burying it in the snow, but it was always back in my pack the next time I checked. And the worst part? It kept updating. Every morning, new entries appeared, written in my hand. Memories I hadn't made yet, conversations I hadn't had, choices I hadn't even taken. And they were always right. Each night, the creature grew, bolder. I'd see it at the edge of the firelight, perfectly still, chest rising and falling as if breathing. I'd blink, and it'd be 5 feet closer. Each morning, I'd wake up back where I started, curled near the sled, the ribbon I tied to mark my path freshly fluttering like it had never moved. Like I had never moved. I've tried walking straight for hours. I've tried zigzagging, circling, crawling. It always brings me back to the snowmobile. I've carved messages into the ice, broken branches to leave signs. None of them stay. It's not just the land that's resetting. It's me. The creature isn't hunting anymore. It doesn't have to. It's replacing, learning every move I make, studying how I think, how I breathe, how I panic. Each loop, it becomes more accurate. The voice is almost perfect now. The eyes, the hands. I caught it mimicking my posture the other night, down to the way I clench my fists when I'm cold. It stood behind a veil of falling snow just far enough to blur the details. But it was me. Not a distorted copy. Not a shadow. Me. The journal says there's only one thing left to happen. That eventually it finishes, and I disappear. But until then, I just keep waking up in this wasteland. Same breath, same frost, same ribbon fluttering in a wind that never stops. Waiting for the thing that already knows me to step inside. It came at dawn. The sky bled pale orange across the white, and for the first time, I saw it clearly. No fog, no distance. Just me. It. Stepping through the stillness like it had always belonged here. Every detail was perfect. My face, my clothes, even the tiny scar on my chin from when I fell off a bike at 7. It walked to the snowmobile with a familiarity that made my stomach turn. I didn't move. I couldn't. It knelt beside the sled, fingers brushing the same buttons I had memorized, and with one clean motion, it started the engine. It roared back, to life like it had never failed. Of course it did. It remembered. I watched as it glanced over its shoulder. No expression, just a blank, calculating stillness. And then it drove off, carving a path through the snow I was never allowed to take. Vanishing toward civilization, toward someone else's life. And I stayed. I don't know if I died out here or if I was rewritten. Erased. But if someone you love comes back from the snow, and something about them feels just a little off, don't ask questions. Don't wait. It's already too late.